Sujewa, this was not the show that I thought that either of us thought it was going to be. We were scheduled for this latest installment of Indie Scene to talk about David Lynch's Inland Empire. Now, I don't like sailing the high seas to watch content. I like paying for legitimate, rental or physical media versions of things. But this is just one of those films from 2006 that is almost impossible to find. Now, there was a full 3-hour version of the film on YouTube that I was like, all right, I want to talk about this movie. I'm getting into David Lynch, so I'll watch it any way I can with a solemn pledge in my heart that whenever it becomes available in a fashion that I can purchase, I will buy it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like when you buy a CD back in 2003, and you own it. I don't feel bad about listening to a version of that song on YouTube if I open the link, because I'm like, well, I already paid for the album. So it's like, whatever. But so yeah, unfortunately, the movie was taken down. I went to watch it yesterday in preparation for this conversation, and it was taken down due to a copyright claim. And so
Mm-hmm.
I like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that's about. I think it's Janus Films
Right.
apparently owns the distribution and screening rights to it. They don't have it available on physical media, but it looks like you can license it out to theaters. And this is sort of a plug. It's going to be a terrible one because I don't have all the dates and info, but you can look it up or I'll have links to it. The Music Box here in Chicago next month is having a complete David Lynch retrospective. I guess it's the second time they've done this in 10 years or something. And they're going to be showing Inland Empire
Awesome.
at that show. So I imagine they probably licensed it from Janus or whatever. So it doesn't surprise me that someone went through and said, hey, is this on YouTube? So all that aside,
They saw our conversation on Twitter.
yes. Well, so all of that aside, we had to pivot. So I'm like, all right, can you recommend a movie that is under 3 hours long, preferably under an hour and a half, that we can talk about or reschedule? And you said, let's talk about Breakthrough Weekend.
Yeah,
My movie. This is your
I
turn.
almost went with the Whale with the Mirror, but Mirror is in the middle of editing a movie, so I don't think he would have been available. So
Right.
we'll do Whale down the road. But back to you.
Definitely. Yeah. But that's the thing is, like, you recommended your own film, Breakthrough Weekend, which I had not seen yet.
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, sure, let's check it out.
Yeah, we've been wanting to take a look at that one for a while.
And so we did, and we are going to talk about that tonight. It's a much like Werewolf Ninja
Let's
Philosopher, it's a
let's
very
do some
unique kind of
updates on
detective
slow
film.
romance.
Yes, I was going to say we'll
Right.
talk about that in a second, but
Sure.
I want to just kind of preface by saying it is in the vein of Werewolf Ninja Philosopher, which came out later, a
Right.
very strange kind of New York detective, otherworldly comedy that kind of knocked my socks off. And I've got a
Nice.
lot of questions about the story and about the making of the film. But before that, as you teased, we are going to talk updates. So I'm going to cede the floor to you, sir. What is going on in the multiverse of Sujewa madness?
A lot happening, getting older, getting more work done. Some people are dying at 70 and 80. That means I only have like 30 plus years, 20 plus years. So gotta get work done. Gotta get work done.
That's right.
What's with people dying at 70? That's not cool. I mean, it should be like 100. Woody Allen is like 150 now, still alive.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, so maybe I'll be on that end of the filmmaker ages.
I hope so.
Anyway, well, I'm glad you had at least a strong response to Breakthrough Weekend, because I had, my media management skills were not as savvy as they are now. I mean, I'm sure I'll get better even down the road. But in 2014, when that movie came out, we had to deal with a horrible New York Times review, but thankfully we had a good Village Voice review that helped me balance, the situation. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. Breakthrough Weekend distribution. So Slow Romance 1, April 8th, we have a screening at Stewart Cinema in Brooklyn. On my Twitter, all the other web pages, there'll be information. I'm going to email all the media, hundreds of people. You'll get a copy of the email also, cool, with all the official quotes and all that. So this will be the kind of the world premiere theatrical. I'm calling it the Brooklyn premiere, which is true. World just sounds like, it's an event that's of relevance to the whole world. So it sounds a little too much like hype, but it's 100% a Brooklyn premiere. And VOD I'm working on. Eventually it'll be on Amazon. So I'm working on that soon, hopefully April, May. Blu-ray merchandise I'm working on. And one of the big projects with this movie was distribution, just getting distribution and marketing, getting out of the underground, making myself famous and my movies famous. Still working on that. Day 60 something of the Year of Slow Romance. By the time this year's done, I think that movie will be famous. Working on many things regarding that, and I'll have monthly updates when we meet up. Slow Romance 2, we did 3 days of rehearsals and B-roll filming already. Coming along. It's going to be very interesting. It's going to be faster and funny and more mainstream accessible. It'll also be super absurd, but the scenes, the romantic scenes, the relationship talks, all that stuff will be super realistic also. So a new kind of a blend between real world and absurdism. So it'll be just a straight on comedy with a lot of the usual stuff that I have in my movies, detective stuff, philosophical stuff, a lot of great New York shots. Aaliyah is doing a great job as usual as Allison. We did some couple of days of improvised scenes. That's helping me fine tune the script. Sort of a new way of working, but I think it'll work out well. Then there'll be a Slow Romance 3 and 4, and if you have any questions, I'll talk about those. Then Breakthrough Weekend we're about to talk about, and I talked to Art from Werewolf Ninja Philosopher, and we're planning what is essentially Werewolf Ninja Philosopher 2, but it'll be more like a Breakthrough Weekend type detective comedy where he is not in werewolf costume, and we'll give him a name. Maybe we'll use the Sal Vulpes name from Breakthrough Weekend, maybe another name. But essentially the story I had planned for Werewolf 2 will be this new detective comedy that I'm doing with Art later this year. It'll have to do with the New York City UFO sex cult. And that is the latest.
So the werewolf, so Art's going to be in the movie as Sal, the detective.
Sal type.
Okay, Sal type, but not the werewolf.
But his personality and way of being will essentially be the werewolf, but without the makeup.
But it's still going to be Werewolf Ninja Philosopher 2?
No, it's going to have a different title.
Oh, okay, I gotcha.
But it's the unofficial Werewolf Ninja Philosopher 2. I'm using the story that I had cooked up for Werewolf Ninja Philosopher 2. Same acting, but it'll be in color, same art, same style. So people who saw Werewolf 1 and who liked it will be able to enjoy this movie. Many elements from Werewolf 1 will be in this movie, except the makeup is very difficult to do in a really realistic way and expensive. And we want to see Art also as a regular human being. So I think we'll try this sort of a unofficial part 2 to Werewolf, and another unusual detective comedy.
Okay. I have faith in you and your storytelling abilities and your judgment.
Awesome.
I'm going to confess to be a little bit disappointed that we're not going to see Art in the werewolf makeup again. I was really looking forward to Werewolf. Now let's say when you become famous at the end of 2022, richer, you've got more resources to put into, like, you can hire Rick Baker or the Rick Baker protege to do the amazing werewolf effects for Art for the eventual Werewolf 2. I want to see this in my lifetime.
Right, there may be. I mean, if we bring back, since we were not using his action skills, Werewolf's action skills, and that would require even more money, safety, choreography, makeup person on set all the time. Eventually, when we have more money, or if someone like Netflix or whoever want to pay for it, we may do a werewolf series. It's a very pop, mainstream type character. So, but for now, we're going to do the unofficial Werewolf 2. Maybe there'll be a follow-up. We'll see. I want to keep working with Art. I want to keep working with Aaliyah. I want to keep those two actors busy because they're really good.
Yeah. So you're doing not Werewolf, sorry. Slow Romance 3 and 4. So
after that, yeah, we're gonna the period of time in the life of these characters and their lives, the sets, the apartments. It's going to be set up for Slow Romance 2. Then immediately after that, we're going to shoot 3 and 4. 3 will be about the The working title is the Realm of Massive Positivity. That's going to be about Rene and his massive positivity stuff. Kind of like an Amelie, but with a male lead type story. And then Slow Romance 4 will be about making underground films, kind of like Living in Oblivion, Day for Night, and that'll be primarily a Allison story. Slow Romance 2 is about the romantic relationship. It's called New York Lovers. So both of them are some kind of like co-leads, and they're solving some problems. And also in Slow Romance 2, this you'll enjoy, we'll work out the detailed plan for ending poverty worldwide.
We talked a bit about, you mentioned that, I think, last episode. I'll be very curious to see how that ties up. I want to go back,
Sure.
and this will kind of tie us into Weekend Breakthrough.
Breakthrough Weekend.
Breakthrough Weekend. In
Close enough.
Yeah, in 2013, 2014, when you're conceiving this movie and you're
2012,
shooting
late 2012.
it started in 2012. Okay, and it came out in
Yeah.
2014.
Yeah, the script was written in 2012, was shot late 2012, edited 2013, released in 2014.
Okay, so it's 10 years ago.
Right.
Did you imagine when you're putting this together? Because I see some through lines in watching Breakthrough Weekend that are coming out in your work now. Not that what you're doing now is kind of sequel to that film or even in the same universe, really, but there's a lot of ideas there about happiness, about the state of the world, about consciousness, about the way people kind of relate to each other and think about their own lives in New York City. Were you thinking these kind of big plans back then? Did you imagine that 10 years on, you'd be working on what, like 4 or 5 films at a time to kind of get out and make this big name for your ideas in the world?
I knew I would make more movies. I didn't know what they would be. In 2014, I would not be even sure what I was going to do next. Then 2017, the werewolf idea came, and werewolf, as you said, and people who see both movies will see, Sal Vulpes, the detective, has a lot of things in common with the werewolf detective, but he's presented in a different way, more low key. Yeah, but a lot of the movies carry on. I think you see this with a lot of auteur filmmakers. Some of the same themes show up in different ways in a lot of their movies. That's just what happens when you are an artist and you are preoccupied with certain things. You find different ways to talk about those subjects.
So what is the preoccupation with happiness?
I think all human endeavor is related to that, even though it might be seen in different ways, as in having a nation, having freedom, having a family, or just being left alone, like that guy in Amir's movie, the isolated man from Man. I think most human activity is related to trying to be happy, contented, and enjoy life. So it's a major theme in human existence. So one that is worth looking at, from different angles.
Well, one of the characters in Breakthrough Weekend, Yevgeny, we're constantly shown his happiness meter, and it kind of comes. Right. I think we see that early in the film, and then later in the movie, it's kind of explained what the happiness level is. That there is essentially 100 degrees of happiness, and you kind of go up and down on the scale depending on where you're at in life. Now, because I feel like you're the kind of guy who would work this out. Do you have your own, like, do you have 100 kind of degrees of happiness, and what would fulfill each of those? Or is it just kind of a general barometer? Like, my gas tank is mostly full, but now it's kind of empty and I got to refill it.
Well, I think one thing you learn being raised Buddhist and or studying Buddhism after that as a secular person, that your thoughts definitely affect how you feel as far as happiness and sadness. So I think that scale you could sort of break down. If you're thinking of like if 100 things are going well in your life, or if you have 100 positive thoughts or whatever, you're probably going to be functioning near the 100% level. So typically I'm probably in the 80s. Generally I have a lot of positive things going on. So fortunately, so I think I'm generally in the 80s, and sometimes when things go really well, you get to the 90s and the hundreds.
Well, speaking of large numbers, at the end of this movie, I watched through like all the way through the end credits.
Awesome.
It's mentioned that this movie is number 1 of 60 and NYC comedies.
59 of those didn't happen.
Well, that was what I was gonna ask for. Like, there's so much stuff. Like looking at your later work, and then looking at this earlier version. First of all, Wild Diner Media is the I guess
I also
presenting
made
this.
my youth back then.
Okay, so tell me about that, and like the whole plan for 1 of 60. Was the 1 of 60 just kind of like a cute, like, hey, I'm gonna make 60 of these movies, or you're really serious about it?
No, I have like 100+ folders with different ideas that I can turn into movies. So no, I was serious about it, and I'm still pursuing that. It's just yeah, but we're not going to keep track of it as 1 of 60, 1 of 50, 1 of 100, because some of them will be like, as we're finding out with Werewolf and Slow Romance, they'll be like a mini series of films that are related. Like Slow Romance, I think I only need to do 4. I think that covers everything in that universe, unless I think of more. So yeah, there's going to be like hopefully at the end of my career, there'll be like 50 or more movies that have some of the similar themes, some of the same actors in New York, different universes in New York, maybe in Sri Lanka and other countries. Yeah, there is a large number of movies that are being planned.
So where was Breakthrough Weekend in your filmography? How many movies in was this for you?
I think that was, let's see, Breakthrough. After that, it was Werewolf, Slow Romance. So I think that was number 8, possibly. But as far as fiction features, that was Wild Diner was the first movie that I made, first fiction feature in '99. Wild Diner, date number 1. And I think Brooklyn Fantastic with Amir we shot, never edited, and Susan Bice. That's going to have to be remade, and the original version will probably be released as an extra, something like that. So that was 3, maybe 2 completed. After that, it was Breakthrough Weekend. So I think that was the 3rd official finished fiction feature of mine.
So with all these kind of projects going on, how did you decide to commit to this and say, okay, Breakthrough Weekend, that's going to be start to finish, gonna write it, direct it, get it out there, as opposed to something that's kind of like, again, something that might need to be revisited or recut in the future?
The money came through. That's what happened. Jennifer Blakemore, the blonde actress in Breakthrough Weekend, she's a film producer, filmmaker, actor. I haven't talked to her in a number of years, but she was in my movie Date Number 1, which I don't think you've seen it, from 2006. She was in town in New York, and she wanted to make something, and she was able to get some of the money together. And I was like, all right, let's put everything else on hold. You're available, I'm available, the money's available, let's make the movie. So yeah, she was a big help, and she's very talented. I liked working with her on both movies. But that year there was a flooding, like a big hurricane or flooding, while we were shooting. So we had to break down the shooting for 2 weeks. Jennifer and her boyfriend moved to Mexico for a couple of weeks because their entire building got flooded or shut down. So we had some major problems. So the shoot didn't really go as smoothly as I would have liked. And I learned a lot about how to do things differently and better in the future projects. But I'm still happy with the project. It's its own unique thing.
So we were talking a bit before we officially started recording. You said this was done and presented, and when I rented it off of Vimeo, which everyone else can too, for $3, you can own it for 10. I think I'm gonna have to double dip so I can add this to my library. But you said it was a 360 presentation, not even 720, far from 1080 or God knows 4K.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. What happened there?
I think in 2012, when I don't think HD was as 1080p HD that we're using now. I don't think it was commonly available and easy to work with. So I think I shot it on 720p, which is a lower form of HD. And I don't think we had the internet connections for releasing it as a regular HD movie. So the copy that's on there was a copy that I was showing to people for booking theaters and all that, and reviewers and all that kind of stuff. So the movie may have been shot in at least 720p, and I may be able to upres it to 1080p and create a 1080p HD version down the road. But on the other hand, that version that you saw, we showed it at a movie theater, and it looked fine on the big movie theater screen. It's just the technology of the time. So I'll have to decide if I'm going to upgrade or I'm just going to keep it as is, just to show people, what the original audience experienced when they saw it.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't until you said something, because I think you said, how did you think it looked? Because it was in 360. I'm like, I watched it on my laptop, so it's
Mhm,
not like a big screen presentation or anything, but it
mhm.
looked fine. Maybe it's because I was so wrapped up in what I was watching and not necessarily
Yes.
how it looked. I didn't notice that it looked like, oh my God, this is horrible. It looked
It
like
didn't look like VHS.
it looked a little better than VHS, but it looked like an independent film from, 10,
So,
10
yeah,
10
yeah.
years ago or whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, also, as a filmmaker or DP, my eyes are really sensitive to, is it 2K, is it 1K, is it SD? So I probably, and other filmmaker DPs will probably pick up on it. Yeah, most regular people may feel it's not HD or 4K, but it might not bother them.
yeah, I don't know. I probably should be more attuned to that stuff, but I,
You know what I may do? I may do a film look version of it, which is relatively easy to do. Add grain, etc. So I might do that. That
no,
might be interesting.
that could be fun.
Yeah.
Um, I did notice, like, I don't know, and I'm curious to ask you about this, but there were scenes in the film, uh, and we'll eventually talk about what this movie is actually
Sure.
about
Yeah,
and
yeah,
some of the
yeah.
things
Do,
that go on in
do
it.
your take on it. Do your take on it.
Well, I will, but I want to ask you before I forget. Like in the middle of a scene, there'll be like a cut.
Mhm.
Not a cut, you're talking like going from a two shot to a close up or something, but just like a two shot of people talking, and then it'll cut to that you can see the hard edit in the middle of the scene.
Mhm.
What is that, a stylistic choice? Is that out of necessity? Because it happens a few times in different spots. I'm just curious about that.
That was a stylistic choice. I think on some of those scenes, the conversation continues over the cut to like an exterior shot, right?
Uh, no,
You hear the audio of the conversation?
yeah, you can hear it. My recollection of it is it's almost like a YouTube cut, like an edit, like you're recording something, but you burp or say too many ums, or you got to go answer the door and then you come back and you kind of start over and continue. So when
Hmm.
you're talking, you see the cut, like I'm here and then I'm over here, but I'm still saying the same thing.
Oh, I see. Like a sort of feels like a jump cut. Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I may have you. I'm pretty sure I used some jump cuts. Yeah. That's a non-traditional, non-smooth cut. Yeah. Now that I remember, the couple of stylistic things I was doing. One was jump cuts. The one was I was looking at two people talking sometimes, and then we cut to some shots of New York, and the conversation continues
Right.
over it as a which is I kind of dropped that in the I mean, we kind of fine-tuned that style when it got to slow romance. Um, we isolated the exterior shots, isolated the conversations, didn't overlap. So yeah, those were stylistic things.
All right. So what is this movie? It's a
Ian's
detect
take,
well,
Ian's mini review.
it's a detective story. It's a very unusual kind of detective story. As we mentioned, Sal Vulpes is an investigator. He seems to kind of just take on these really strange private eye type cases. Um, One involves a woman named Maribel, who's
Mhm.
a upscale kind of New York realtor that you mentioned. Is she was also the producer of the film, or one of the producers.
One of the
She
producers.
she suspects that her boyfriend is cheating on her. So she sends Sal and his new kind of sidekick, or this kid's kind of like mentoring under him, Yevgeny, who I also mentioned. They go off and they do some, snooping around, and I don't want to give anything away, especially people are going to be renting this. So I'm going to do my best to talk around some of this, which kind of sucks because I wrote down some of the things that
I don't know. Talk about it because this is from 2014. It's been on Vimeo forever. Uh,
okay. I
spoilers, 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 spoilers. Spoilers.
I'll go light spoilers because there's
Okay,
some
good.
stuff that you just have to experience. Like I was
Because
laughing
this
out
movie
loud during
didn't
parts
get
of this.
this movie didn't get the full critical engagement that I wanted for all my movies, that I want for all my movies. People who are getting into it and asking questions about it. So
Okay.
I'm excited about you getting into it.
Well, all right. So they go and investigate this affair. Um,
Mhm.
it's Brad is the boyfriend,
Right.
who's an actor, and he's got like he wants to be a writer as well. He's always constantly jotting down ideas. She suspects he's cheating. Turns out he is,
Mhm.
and Sal gives him kind of a way out. He says, "I'm going to give you a 1 month head start on confess or cleaning up your act
Right.
with regards to Mirabelle, because she's really crazy about you and you seem to like her, but you can't keep it in your pants." That
Mhm.
was a very interesting proposition. And so I'm like, okay, so this movie is going to be about Brad cleaning up his act and, wacky hijinks ensue. But no, Sal and Yevgeny take on another case
That's right.
involving a couple that is having a
German
very,
couple. Yeah, German couple.
yeah, very interesting relationship problem. They're about to lose all their money
Right.
because people because their dad back in Germany is about to cut them off, I guess, and
Yeah,
that could really mess up things for them. They're very passionate lovers who also happen to be siblings.
that's right. Egads. Shocking.
What? Let's see. What's the line? My brother is a great lover. Thank you, Marta.
That's so ridiculous.
And the thing is, Sal decides to help them
Right.
by essentially saying, okay, look, you guys can never be together again. We're going to set you up on some dates. And Yevgeny's kind of horrified by this whole situation. And
As
it's,
he should be.
well, but the great thing is there's, I think, 2 or 3 happiness level title cards that come up, with Yevgeny. And it's
Right.
always nice to see it going up. It starts out at like 20, but then it's like 40 and 65. And
Right.
then as he gets involved in this situation, it falls like 20 points.
Oh, one thing I should mention, because of all the problems we had with the weather issues and other issues, there were some scenes I couldn't really, that I was unable to film that told more of a Yevgeny story. So yeah, we would have shown why his happiness level changes, all that. But one of the things I learned is make it simpler, and have more controllable elements, and don't have so many producers, and don't have hard deadlines for finishing. Just when you try to do so much, such a complex story in a sort of an old-fashioned filmmaking type style, with producers and all that, it's very tough to do as an indie project. So that's why on the next project and the one after, and Slow Romance was partially due to the COVID crisis, I stripped things way down. No producers except me, and grant money is okay, donations are okay. So yeah, the problems I ran into making Breakthrough Weekend, which some of the narrative problems you can see, yeah, may influence how I made the 2 movies after that.
Well, I mean, I don't see the thing. I almost, I
Yeah,
don't
you
know
don't
what.
see it.
Well, I don't know what that Yevgeny stuff, like the kind of filling in, giving more context would have been,
Mhm.
but I like the way it's presented here.
Awesome.
I'm just assuming he's becoming happier because he's spending more time with Sal and kind of getting Sal's wisdom. This really comes to a head towards the end of the movie, because they're
Uh,
kind of
how
talking.
did you how did you like the two actors and their performances?
uh Damien Bosco, it took me a couple of scenes to
Mhm,
actually understand what was going on,
mhm,
because I mean, frankly, his first scene, I wondered, is he a bad actor?
mhm.
There is a kind of a stiltedness to his presentation, and almost like he's reciting lines quality to it.
Mhm.
But Yevgeny, it stands out because Yevgeny, the actor playing him,
It's more
Sean,
naturalistic.
yeah, Sean Bempong, is
Bempong, yeah,
so naturalistic that it
yeah.
seemed incongruous. I'm like, what kind of a story, what kind of a film, what's the language of this movie? Is it naturalism, or is it more kind of performative? What is it?
I
Uh,
think with Sal, I was going for what we ultimately ended up with Werewolf. You know, and Art did it in a really good way. I wanted sort of a cut and dry, kind of like detective fiction writing. How it's very sparse, that kind of a style. But we ended up with what we ended up with.
well, I think that came across in the writing. It's just in the performance,
Right, right.
it was kind of dodgy for me, those first couple of scenes. But and I haven't seen any of Damien Bosco's other work, so I can't speak to whether or not this is something he crafted for Breakthrough Weekend, or if this is just what he does. But
He's a good actor.
yeah,
This is something we were trying to put together.
well, and this is what I want to get to, before it comes off sounding that like I think he's terrible. Uh, what I kind of came to understand about the movie, intentional or not, was that he is almost like an alien. He is
Right,
so far above, or he's so far into this whole like happiness thing, that he almost doesn't quite, almost like being a Vulcan.
right.
He is a humanoid, he interacts with other people, but there is this kind of an nth level consciousness that gives him this kind of an alien quality.
And
So
he actually has some powers, which we see down the road. And he has an interesting resume. Special forces type stuff, blah blah blah, around the world.
well, and that's all in the kind of the opening, voiceover stuff in the first couple of minutes of the film. And I was kind of taken aback by it. I'm like, wait, what is this? Or what if there's all this kind of information dump coming at me? And then I just see these two guys talking to each other in the street. And I'm like, wait, what's going on here? But no, I will say, like, the Sal Vulpes character and Damien Bosco in particular, by the end of the movie, I was totally on board with it, and I
Awesome.
loved it. I gotta
Right.
go once I buy the buy the movie so I can add it to my home library.
Awesome.
I'll
Yeah,
go back and
Damien would
watch it
like
again with that in mind.
awesome. Damien would probably like hearing that also, Sean, because the release was and the response was not the best. So, I think they did a great job. I mean, considering some of the problems we had. But it is what it is. I enjoyed the movie and a bunch of other people did also. So I'm glad you liked it.
Well, the thing is, like, it's so, that performance stands out as such a contrast to the other performances in the movie, which come off as very very natural. You got some great actors in these parts, and one of the things I'm curious
Also a
about.
good direction and good writing.
What, yes, I mean, that kind of goes without saying, but what I'm saying is, if there were other people in the movie acting the way
Right,
he was acting, then I'd start
right.
to question, is it
That's right,
just a weird mix of acting styles in this film? And that kind of becomes a problem unless it's
right.
integral to the story, which it's not. But I
Yeah, I
guess,
think I was going to, go ahead.
well, I was going to say, like, is there, I guess I'm so used to, like, when we talked to owner Tukel a couple months ago, like, he's got actors showing up in like all the different movies he makes. I don't
Mhm.
recognize and I haven't seen all of your films, but why did you not work with some of these folks again, or come up with them as recurring characters?
Um, I was thinking about doing something similar. I think what happened was Werewolf. Uh, so the next movie I made was Werewolf, and I wanted to have a sort of a minority lead. And I met Art, and he's a good actor. So we went with Werewolf. So Werewolf was kind of the more of a fine-tuned version of the Sal Vulpes character, because you see some of the similar extraordinary abilities, the sort of the detachment, um, and Werewolf was a little bit into happiness, but I think we moved the happiness concern to slow romance because Renee is the happiest man, in North America in that movie. Uh, I think Damien is a lawyer, and I'm not sure what Sean's up to. I think Sean was doing some music stuff. Yeah, it was kind of a difficult project. So if it becomes possible, I'd like to work with the everyone again. We just haven't really been in touch. And once you start a new project, like I think the next film project I did was the one for I was producing Matt Solarsight's it's Space Rabbit, and all these film projects are different, and they sort of take up all your time. Then like a year or two goes by, and who knows, you don't have people's contact information anymore. And then Werewolf happened, and then Slow Romance happened. If it becomes possible, I'm open to working with everyone I've worked with in the past. So we'll see. We'll see in a few years.
Well, it was great. And I haven't talked about the third kind of storyline, although you alluded to it with the magical powers. It's crazy because this movie is it's an hour and 20 minutes long.
Right, 80 minutes.
Yeah, a little shorter than that technically because there's some title cards like Where Are They Now, and then the end credits.
Right.
But you stuff like these three major detective storylines into this movie. Each one of these could have been like a 20-minute or a half hour like Netflix show if you're talking about that. But I didn't feel at the end of it like I needed to see more. Even the throwaway kind of like last minute, where the hell did this come from thing about the two guys writing the book about independent film and having an argument about mumblecore, and one of them turns out to be a fucking wizard, like a real life wizard using magical powers. I'm like, I buy it, and there's a resolution. The whole thing, start to finish, is maybe 8 minutes of screen time,
Right.
but it's perfect. It's like a perfect short film amidst everything else.
Yeah, those actors, everyone, the wizard actors, David Steinberg, and I forget the other actor, they did a great job. That was the first time I think David was acting for the first time. And yeah, they have a knife fight over mumblecore.
And actually, I want to ask you about the effect when the wizard casts his spell, and kind of knocks the other guy for a loop. It looked like at that moment, because they're in sort of a almost like an office building or a high rise or something, and there's windows, right?
Right.
The like lens flare from the window kicks in just as that spell is being cast, and I couldn't tell if that was a happy accident or if that was a digital effect or what, because it looked like there was some kind of a distortion after that, kind of showing this guy getting dizzy and falling to the floor. But was that something that you captured in camera, or was that an effect you added later? Because it worked brilliantly.
Awesome. Yeah, that was an effect. I've combined 2 or 3 effects to create the wizard attack, from Final Cut Pro. That was
including that initial lens flare thing.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Because it looked like the last effect I saw, like the kind of distortion. I could kind of tell. Okay, I couldn't tell what it was, but I could tell it's not natural. But when you first see the lens flare, it looks like he's almost summoning the powers of the sun or something. It was very convincing.
Yeah, thank you. No, I combined a couple of effects. But it's interesting that you like the movie because the Village Voice critic, Stephanie Sakarak, who's the Time critic now, she liked the movie. She didn't like some aspects of it, but generally it was positive. The New York Times critic, who I blocked on Twitter, he didn't like the movie at all. So so it goes to show that you have to approach each movie on its own terms, not have sort of a fixed standard on what is good and what is bad, because each movie is, so many different things affect what a movie is. Good critics certainly have to be open to, like you're doing, figuring out what the thing is before making judgments.
So let me ask, and I don't want to dwell too much on it, but I'm curious, because critics especially interpret things differently from one another.
Mhm.
There's a reason I label myself the last guy anyone asks. Um, but what was this critic's beef? Well, first of all, how did you get reviewed in the New York Times? Was this like kind of an indie roundup thing, or because that seems like a pretty big deal, and unfortunately it didn't, it turned out kind of a sour one. But
Right. And I've decided, and actually I noticed a pattern. New York Times is risky. Half the time or more, if it's a no budget movie, the review is not going to be good. If you luck out with certain critics, it's good. Sometimes, it's very difficult if a movie is not recommended through the pipeline of Cannes, Sundance, the big festivals, and someone in New York is releasing it. And this is not just me. A lot of New York filmmakers have had this problem with New York Times. It's tough to get favorable reviews because I think the studios spend a lot of money. I mean, millions of dollars on ads, and the New York Times is like the #1 newspaper, right? So there definitely is some sort of institutional bias towards movies that are already accepted and celebrated as major commercial work or major film festival type artwork, whereas DIY stuff they don't really seem to take seriously. And they seem to judge the DIY stuff using the criteria for like big budget Hollywood movies and Cannes award winners, blah blah blah. But Village Voice is much more open. They're like, let's take a look at it for what it is, and let's take a look at that. Yeah, the Times reviewer thought nothing worked, and yeah, he didn't have anything pleasant to say about the movie. You can Google it, New York Times Breakthrough Weekend. You'll see. He just completely didn't get it. I think the wrong person saw the movie, saw that movie. So since then, I look at who I send the movie to. Do they like this kind of stuff, or will they just completely not understand what's happening? It's like sending a slow cinema movie to someone who only loves like Captain America movies, right? It's not going to work.
well, maybe. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
because I mean, I'm thinking about our mutual friend Mark Krawczyk.
Right.
He
Oh yeah, he
watched
liked it.
and very favorably reviewed Secret Society for Slow Romance, and he's very green in turn. I've been, ever since I started talking to you. I have a weekly show with Mark for his the Spoiler Room podcast.
Mhm.
We do a live stream and we kind of do a pre-show. And ever
Awesome.
since I've kind of hooked up with you, not in that sense, kids, but
Right.
got together, started talking
Intellectually.
movies.
Right.
Yes. Um, I've been, evangelizing slow cinema, and he's like, "What the hell is slow cinema?"
That's right.
But so I think kind of preparing, that road for him. He's open to it, but he
Great.
watches a lot of independent horror films, but he also goes and sees the new mainstream releases every week. I
Awesome.
understand where you're coming from. There are certain people out there who like what they like in terms of like genre and budget considerations. It's kind of like talking to kids nowadays, like about any movie that came out before 2000, especially something in black and white. They're like, I'm not going to watch that nonsense. But let me ask you this: the New York Times review. You said there was nothing positive about it. Did you? And I haven't read the review.
But
Did you?
they used a really nice image in the review, so it
Was
looks
it?
good. The image looks great.
Was it higher than 360? No.
No, it was. I mean, it's still image. It looked good. It's just like
Yeah.
it looked like whatever the regular standard the images they use are as far as resolution. It was just Sal standing on a street. There's a woman running down the street.
So, but reading that negative criticism.
Oh, how did you like Jennifer Blakemore's performance?
Well, I want to finish up on this point first.
Sure.
But reading that negative criticism, did you gain anything from that? Did whatever they? I don't know if they were giving specific examples or if they just said none of it worked, it all sucked. Was there anything that you kind of took in and said, I can understand that, or that's something I hadn't thought of? Because I imagine as we're talking, you're saying you had some limitations. There were, natural disasters and other kind of considerations that prevented you from making the movie that you ultimately would have made in your wildest dreams.
Mhm.
Now, someone might pick up on this and put it in a criticism, and you could say, or in a critique, and you could say, yeah, I know, I understand that. But was there anything that this person pointed out where you said, maybe I could have done that better? I hadn't really thought about that. Did you gain anything positive from their negativity?
Well, even though I wasn't able to film everything, I used titles and I edited in a certain way so that, as you were able to tell, the audience, certain audiences got a good experience out of the whole movie. So, no, I thought the New York Times review was an example of the wrong person seeing the wrong movie, and I should totally figure out how to show movies only to people who are who are most likely going to be into that style of movies. Village Voice was more useful. She said the image was not great and the sound was not great. That could have been because she saw it on a DVD copy,
Hmm.
and sometimes DVD copies, homemade DVD copies, and how on the device that it plays on, it affects the image quality and the sound, especially in 2014, early 2014. But she picked up on a lot of the good things about the movie, the Jarmusch influences, and the link. I think I sent you the link to the Village Voice review by Stephanie Zachariah. Um, no, that review was much more helpful. It showed me that, yeah, what I was trying to convey does come across, but maybe I need to spend more time on color and sound, which I did on the subsequent movies.
Yeah, I think Stephanie Zacharek. I think I used to read her on Salon. If I
She's the head critic at Time now, I think.
Yeah, I know, but I'm pretty sure that because I used to read
Right.
Salon a lot back in the day, and I think she was the film critic for that as
Yeah, and
well.
Village
So that's
Voice.
very cool that you got someone of her kind of caliber and stature to look at the movie and review it favorably. I would
That
imagine that
helped.
have to be a
That
bit
helped
of
a
a
lot.
boost after the crushing New York
Right,
Times
right.
thing. But going back real quick before we talk about Jennifer Blakemore, how did you? I don't know if we answered this question, but how did you get this in front of the New York Times? Did you
Oh,
send it to them, or did they pick it up, or did they ask you about it, or what?
no, I organized as a release to release it. I organized a film festival uh, where this movie would run for a week. Some other movies would run for a week also, called Breakthrough Festival. And because it was running for a week in New York, they were open to taking a look at it per their policy at the time. I mean,
Hmm.
they could still say no. They could still say, I mean, there's thousands of movies playing in New York. But this one lucked out, and I submitted it. They selected it. Yeah, it's just the same thing now. Every publicist and filmmaker sends their information. They cover whatever they want to cover for whatever reason.
All right. Okay, so you were wondering what I thought of Jennifer Blakemore's performance.
Mhm.
I thought it was really good. I mean,
Awesome.
I like all of the performances uh, in this movie.
Great.
Was she? You said she was one of the producers on the film. I don't know. Is she an actress, or because you mentioned that there are some of the people in this film, they have like other like day jobs, but they
Mhm.
also acted in your movie. Is she a pro, or what's her deal?
Yeah, I think all of them have a certain amount of experience. I mean, she was in one of my other movies,
Hmm.
Date Number One in 2000, which was finished in 2004. We shot in 2004. It came out in 2006. Yeah, she does art, acting. I think she makes jewelry, and she may have some other businesses. Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly what she's up to now or what other work she was doing at the time. But yeah, acting and modeling. Oh, she was a model also. She was a pro model for a long time. Um, yeah, acting and modeling was one of the things that she did. Two of the things that she did.
Yeah, I dug her kind of intro scene where she's actually showing an
Real estate
apartment.
agent. Yeah.
Yeah, where she was showing the apartment to the one guy, and he had some very very
he
interesting
wants to
ideas for that space.
he wants to bring disco back. That's so funny.
Yeah, and he wants to essentially use that as the tryout location for a dance club that he's gonna open downtown or something.
Right.
Wow.
Hmm.
I almost
I
want
should
to say,
say, I should say I got access to all those great locations because of Jennifer and David, their producers who were also in the movie. They had, access to some nice real estate. Like Jennifer's character's apartment. That's her apartment. Um, and the knife fight with the wizards that's in David's apartment, and the real estate, that apartment we showed, that's something that they had. Yeah, so that helped a lot. I mean, and I think I kind of, I always knew that New York looked great, but the area that we shot in, sort of Midtown, and just near Empire State Building, yeah, that was nice to get access to that area and film in that area, and that sort of set me up to keep great shots of New York as a thread, as a storyline in the subsequent movies.
Okay, so we're gonna see a Sal Vulpes type character, if not Sal Vulpes, come back for
Sal Vulpes / werewolf type character. Art playing him without the werewolf makeup.
Well, Art and Damie Bosco look very different.
Right.
For a couple of reasons. But no, it reminds me of something that you actually mentioned on the Batman live stream from last week. When you said, for the next Batman movie, they should cast like a Mexican Bruce Wayne or a Mexican Batman and have one of the villains say, "Hey, you look kind of different. Cool." And then they just keep fighting.
Or you're Mexican.
Or you're Mexican, yeah. I think you should do that for the Sal character. Just bring back Sal Vulpes.
Right.
But just have him be played by Art, and have someone, if you can get like one of the actors from a previous case from Breakthrough Weekend to be in the movie, you could say, "You look a little different than last time I talked to you."
That's right. He can be like COVID, man.
I was gonna say the pandemic changes people. Oh.
For the filmmaker buddies out there, one thing I learned is that the structure, between that and making Werewolf and then Slow Romance, what I learned is that the typical indie filmmaking style, which is sort of a pared down Hollywood style. You have a cast and crew, you have set shoot dates, you don't rehearse much, you show up, you shoot, you move on to the next thing. That's not the best way to make really good work. You need a lot of time. You need to rehearse. You need sort of an open-ended schedule. Keep things as minimal as possible. And so that's what I did in Werewolf. Like 5 actors, a couple of locations. Then we went as minimal as possible for Slow Romance. 2 actors, and director and cinematographer, one of the actors, a couple of locations. So the smaller the project is, the better I was able to control all the elements and ensure that we had higher quality. So the responses in general are better for the subsequent movies. Werewolf got that's a very unusual movie, but it got a really good response from people who are into that kind of stuff. Then Slow Romance is getting a good response good response from people who are into stuff like My Dinner with Andre and Before Sunrise type movies. So keep it simple, give yourself a lot of time, rehearse, and really ignore the typical indie filmmaking structure and pace. Slow it down.
Well, I wonder if there's any way to kind of compromise between that, because honestly, I really liked Breakthrough Weekend because it had like these multiple storylines. It had a relatively big cast compared to some of the other stuff that you've done. But I also understand that it's got to be almost impossible to make a film with the production sensibilities of a Slow Romance, telling the story, the complex story or storylines of Breakthrough Weekend, because you can't have an open-ended schedule when you've got a handful of actors, some of whom are lawyers or doing whatever. They've got day jobs, they've got families, they've got lives. So you can't be like 6 months from now, hey, come back and shoot for 10 days.
I think the compromise is you work in at least a month of rehearsal, or at least a couple of weeks of rehearsal. A lot of the on Breakthrough Weekend and a lot of other indies, there isn't a lot of rehearsal time. People get the script, they show up to the set, maybe they memorize the lines, they run through it a few times, and they shoot. Slow Romance benefited greatly by us having time to do like 10 takes if necessary. So the compromise is rehearsal time.
Now I got a question about that. Is there, you're saying that it's kind of the standard for a lot of independent films that
and
they
Hollywood movies in many cases.
well that they don't do a lot of rehearsal. Is that a time or is that a financial thing? Like
The
when you
financial,
because you I would imagine, and pardon me if this sounds horribly ignorant, but I imagine you have to pay the actors for each rehearsal, or is it the
yeah,
understanding that you're going to pay them a certain amount and that includes a certain amount of rehearsal, or what?
right. And indie film, most of indie film, indie fiction filmmaking, mainstream oriented, kind of inherited the structure and norms from Hollywood. So Hollywood does it the way it does because it would be, the way that they pay their actors. It's cheaper to not have, theater type lengthy rehearsals. It's cheaper for the actor to get the script, show up on a certain day for 2 or 3 days, or a week, or 2 weeks, or a month, do the work and get out. But the performance definitely suffers when you don't rehearse.
Because I'm just thinking now of like certain movies where you've got two lead actors, like big Hollywood movies, like, oh, these people have no chemistry. Now I'm
Right.
wondering if that's because like
Yes.
Owen Wilson is off in his trailer developing his character, and Jennifer Lopez is doing her thing, and while on tour around the world, kind of memorizing lines, they get to set and they're just like on totally different planets because
Yep.
they didn't get together. That's a speculation based on a recent movie I
Yeah.
saw them in. But
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
it's
That's a
interesting.
common problem. People, actor. It's very tough having acted in slow romance and done okay with it. It's very tough to not have rehearsal and just dive into something and connect with people on a sort of a close level and coordinate and make it look naturalistic, right? And hit all the goals of the scene. Anytime you have such weird performances on a mainstream movie, it's probably in part because the actors didn't have enough time to prep and work with each other to create the scene that they need to create.
Yeah.
There
Well,
could be other issues, but that's certainly an issue.
no, it's just something I hadn't really thought about before. Now I'm not going to
Whereas
be
in
not think of it.
Right, whereas in theater, they rehearse for like a month or more before they put on the play, and the performances are great, theatrical, but they're great for that medium. And in movies, sometimes, even movies with huge budgets, feels like people are in like 5 different movies because
Well,
the performance hasn't gelled together into one cohesive whole.
well, it's interesting split there, because with theater you have to rehearse forever
Right,
because you're not filming a movie where you're going to record this scene and get it down,
right.
and aside from reshoots, that's it. It's
Mhm.
going to be cut together into a final film. With a play, you're out there performing that twice a day,
Right.
3 times on weekends,
I have to
for
have it down.
months on end. So you have to have the lighting and the blocking and the effects and the performances and the music or whatever,
Mhm.
for you're doing that all the time.
Yeah.
So it really has to work, or else it falls apart and your play closes after the opening weekend.
Right. So for high quality indie work, work in rehearsal time. That's my advice to the kids.
No, it's great advice. I don't think people really talk about that enough.
Well, when people get into filmmaking, they just assume the structure that everyone uses is the best structure. No, it's not. You have to look at lots of possibilities and see what works for you. One thing I learned is less people standing around, better I can work. Less people on the set, better I can work. For acting, definitely. I don't want to be rushed at all. I want to take my time and do different versions, see what works. So in the future, I'm going to try to keep. I did come up with a way. Slow romance 2, 3, and 4 will be similar to, in a way, closer to Breakthrough Weekend. It'll have multiple stories with multiple characters. You just have to organize things in a way that you're not trying to shoot everything, in 1 weekend or 2 weekend or 3 weekends. You just do one story, then the next one, and the next one, like as if each one is a separate movie. Then you put it together. Just you have to make time to get the performances right.
Nice. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how all this fits together. Um, and yeah, I think I don't have any other questions. I don't think about Breakthrough Weekend. Do you have anything else you wanted to talk about in relation to it, or anything we haven't covered tonight?
Hopefully Ukraine will win. There's a war going on in Europe. You know, that's disconcerting because the nuclear weapons might come into play. Other than that, yeah, I'm glad you got to see Breakthrough Weekend. Yeah, it's an unusual movie. I think some people will really dig it, and yeah, I'm glad you got to see it. You should also check out Date Number One, my previous fiction feature from 2006. You'll see Jennifer in that, in a very interesting story, kind of a story that's going to be brought back in another future movie. And my earlier first feature, I think I have it on VHS. I have to figure out a way to make that available, as you know, for completists who want to see all my stuff.
Is Date Number One, is that also on Vimeo, on your Vimeo channel?
On Vimeo, yeah.
Okay.
You can rent it.
All right. Well, I'll link that down below as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. So thank you. Yes, as far as the possibility of nuclear holocaust, that's not going to happen.
Good.
Because
Tough to make
you haven't made your movies yet. I mean, I'm gonna be a zero on the happiness meter if I go to my fiery bright grave without having seen, you know, art following up Slow Romance 2, 3, and 4, and also finding out how art takes over this you know, this new version of the detective story and UFOs and shit. I got to find out how that all plays out. So yeah.
One thing, the short title of Slow Romance 2 is New York Lovers and the Mystery of Immortality. That's going to be one of the subplots dealing with immortality.
Love it.
Awesome.
That's better than some of the Indiana Jones sequel titles I've seen. But all right, man. Well, Sujewa, thank you for suggesting this as a replacement for Inland Empire. I don't know what I would have made of that film. You know, hopefully I would have enjoyed it, but I can't imagine. I was going to say, I can't imagine enjoying that movie more than Breakthrough Weekend. I could be wrong, but I had a lot of fun with it, and I'm glad that we got to talk about all the kind of ins and outs of it. This has been great.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll promote the video when it comes out in a couple of days, right?
Wednesday. Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Or today, as people are watching this.
That's right. Talk to you soon next month, and hopefully in June, I think, or July. I think June is when I hope to have a Slow Romance 2 done. Let's see if I hit that goal.
All right. Well, I'm pulling for you, and we'll be talking about it in the months leading up to that. Folks, be sure and check out Sujewa's stuff. It'll be all linked below. You can subscribe to the Kicking the Seat YouTube channel and podcast, and follow us for all the updates. Like it, subscribe, tell your friends, and join us back here next month. We're not going to tell what's going to, you know, what we're talking about, but we're going to have a very special guest that Sujewa and I are very excited to talk to.
Good deal.
There is a hint in one of our previous episodes. We talked to a filmmaker with whom our guest was involved. Not romantically, but professionally for sure. So yeah, join us back here for our April edition of IndieSeen. Thank you very much. And Sujewa, take care. Good luck doing all that movie stuff, and keep your head about you, man.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.